So here we go. So officially, good evening, everyone. My name is Annie Brissette. I'm the Director of Operations of Agile Montreal. During tonight's panel, I invite you to put your sound on mute and maybe also turn your camera off to really let our panel shine and take the screen for us tonight. So thanks, everyone. So for those of you who are less aware of Agile Montreal is a nonprofit organization that aims to promote agility in the organizations and be a destination for professionals who work in the agility field. I invite you to go on our website. We have many different activities, lots of events every month. We have a newsletter. We're on social media. So I invite you also to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media to always stay aware of what is happening with Agile Montreal. Our next big event that we have is called Spark the Change. So it's a big event that's taking place in April. So it's 6 afternoons in the month of April. Where networking and workshops are really at the heart of the event. So I invite you to discover that event. I'm going to share the link in the chat in a few minutes. And before we start, I wanted also to invite my colleague Aliki to say a few words on behalf of PMI Montreal. Yeah, go ahead.
There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Aliki. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for PMI Montreal. For those of you who may not know us, our mission is to promote project management best practices and professionals in project management in Quebec. And we're part of the international global community of PMI. And it wasn't so long ago that Agile practitioners and traditional waterfall PMs saw themselves as in conflict and as a bit of an opposing teams. And it's important for us to partner with Agile Montreal to educate and communicate that it's complementary, it's collaborative, and we're all part of the same community trying to make the world a better place through these best practices, and we're all learning from each other. So I'd like to thank all the volunteers who put this evening together. Marius from PMI Montreal, he's our community of practice, Disciplined Agile, and Danielle, Eric, Annie, and Bill. Thank you so much. It's great to be able to collaborate for this first event together. There will be more. Our goal here is to bring both communities together more often so that you have an opportunity to exchange on these best practices and learn and grow. And so that's how we're going to get out of this, right? Real quickly, I want to just bring up two things, promote two events. We have our ACP training course at the end of March for anyone who's interested in becoming ACP Agile Certified Practitioner certified. And we also have the DASM certification in French being offered in May. So that's going to be the second time we're offering it, part of the Disciplined Agile certifications. So if you have any questions, please visit our website, pmimontreal.org, Facebook, LinkedIn. They're all connected to me, so you'll be talking to me eventually. So thank you so much, and enjoy this panel.
Thanks, Aliki. And yeah, thanks again to everybody who participated in the organization of this event, a co-production of PMI Montreal and Agile Montreal. It's the first time that we co-produce an event, and I hope we're going to do many more. Thanks to all of you to be here with us. And thanks to our panelists also to have taken the time and accepted our invitation to be part of this event tonight. So without any further ado, I'm gonna pass the mic to our host, tonight's host. He's a trainer, he's a coach. He has his own podcast, which is called The Sprinkler, which many of you should know. So let me introduce you to our host, Eric Laramé.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We truly appreciate it. Special thanks to Karen, Bill, and Danielle, 3 experts on Disciplined Agile. So before we start, maybe you just tell us a little more about yourselves. Maybe we could start with Karen. Karen, who are you?
Who am I?
Who are you?
Sure. So my name is Karen Lewis. I currently live in Clearwater, Florida, but I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. I have been working for the same firm, Franklin Templeton Investments, which is a global asset management company, for 24 years. And I actually started in our Toronto office and then moved to Florida about 16 years ago. I started getting involved in project management about 20 years ago, and in agility probably shortly thereafter. And I brought Disciplined Agile to Franklin Templeton about 7-ish years ago. And, you know, we had been struggling with Scrum and other kinds of modalities for quite some time. And, you know, once we found Disciplined Agile, we found our niche and we went through our transformation. And so I'm here to kind of help share some of our experiences through that overall experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Bill, how about you?
Hi, so I'm Bill Brantley, and right now I am in College Park, Maryland on the East Coast. And I work currently for the Navy in the Inspector General's office as a trainer and senior training specialist. For that, I worked at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for 5 years as a training specialist there, and also ran a lot of projects there. And yeah, a long, long time ago, I used to be an IT project manager, so I had about 15, almost close to 20 years of that kind of experience. So I've been, and I just kind of realized as I did the math in my head, I've had about 25 years of experience in project management, and got introduced actually to Agile when it came out in 2000. I was at Social Security Administration. And at the time we were going through RAD-JAD training, which is Rapid Application Development, Joint Application Development. And that was my first exposure to Agile. I loved it. So I've been practicing with it for the last, I'd say since 2000. Yeah. And I'm probably on this panel here. I probably have the least experience with Disciplined Agile, because I discovered this about a year or so ago. But the minute I learned about it, I immediately went towards the certification. I just said, this is such a brilliant idea. I need to get in on this. So.
but maybe the person who has the most experience with the Disciplined Agile in the public sector. Maybe.
Could be.
I don't know. We'll let Danielle answer that question. Danielle, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here, but the host seems to have disabled my camera.
Oh.
Well, hold on, Danielle. I'm going to see if I can do something. And while I'm doing that, just a quick reminder that you can ask your questions in the chat throughout the event.
Yep.
And we're going to take questions every 15 minutes or so. And you can ask also your questions in French if you're less comfortable in English. Vous pouvez poser vos questions en français, puis je vais les traduire pour nos panélistes. So Daniel, I see you now.
Yes, thank you. I feel like I'm back in the game here.
Sight for sore eyes. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Hi. So yes, Daniel Gagnon. So basically, I would say I'm a career project manager, but that would only be going back 20 years, and I'm older than that. So I have a secret to share with you guys. The first 10 years of my career were actually in television, and 5 years in studios, and 5 years as a post-production graphics and animation designer. In fact, since this is a Montreal audience, I can tell you that in 1988, I won a Gémeaux for Rock et Belles Oreilles. So
that's great.
This goes back quite some time. So basically, yeah, television from the age of 22 when I started working full time to my early 30s. Then from there, I was partnering, and I was a partner in the company I was working with by then. And we started branching into multimedia, CD-ROMs, websites.
CD-ROMs. Oh my, just like
CD-ROMs,
so walk back into memory lane.
Yeah, exactly. So, and basically, you know, we got too big for me to be able to continue doing the actual, you know, work of animation and stuff. And so I became a project manager just because de facto, you know, that's how we all become project managers, right? Hey, you're pretty organized. So nobody else has the time. So from then I wound up in IT, and then in 2010, my first encounter with agility, and I was hooked. It was like, wow, it was like, you know, an absolute epiphany. And within maybe 18 months of that, I encountered Disciplined Agile in the form of, and Bill, you'll remember this, and maybe Karen as well, a rational method composer template. That's how Disciplined Agile started. It was a rational method composer template by IBM. And I said, wow, what is this? It's so open. Anyway, long story short, I met Mark and Scott in around 2013, I guess, started working with them. And then since then, I've trained hundreds of people. I've brought a disciplined agile approach to, large financial institutions, to startups, to just about every coaching, consulting, and training engagement I've been on. I've brought this approach because it's so agnostic, it's so open. And I won't get into further than that because now we're getting into the actual content. But
just by curiosity, have you dabbled in the public sector also, like Bill?
In the public sector, not so much. No.
So Bill, you're the expert in that.
Yeah, I would definitely say.
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit. Recently, recent Quebec government engagement I was on, I actually used a disciplined agile approach, but nothing compared to Bill's experience here.
That's fascinating. So we've been saying disciplined agile for a while now. In a nutshell, what is disciplined agile? Then maybe you could lead this one.
I certainly can. And we wanted to keep this as a panel and not make it a presentation. So I consulted with my fellow panelists just before coming on, and we agreed that I could present this one slide because it really sort of addresses that question, une image vaut mille mots, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So let me just share this quickly and I'll explain Disciplined Agile in a nutshell with this one image. What are we looking at here? The green onion with the gray in the middle is your layers of complexity, from simple to complicated to complex or chaotic. And based upon the complexity of what you're trying to do on the horizontal axis and maybe the volatility of the scope of what you're trying to achieve on the vertical. So you can see now that what I've superimposed within the onion basically is, very broad stroke. This is my drawing. This is not meant to be at scale. This is not meant to be represent precise delineations, but to give you a broad idea. For example, if we look at the waterfall oval, what I'm saying here basically is, a traditional approach to product and service delivery with a sequential beginning and end and so on, and a planning and execution phase. When we're in, sort of simple or well-known domains that have been around for a while where the scope is not changing too much, well then, a traditional sequential waterfall approach is fine, because it suits the context. If you start getting into things that are more complicated, where the scope is moving around, maybe a Scrum XP approach, an iterative approach, where you can actually make sure that you're always working on the most important things, but it's still, you can still chunk it into iterations. That's where Scrum or XP sort of practices tend to shine. When you're getting into complex and you are, for example, a team, let's take a example of a software team that would also be doing defect correction and taking new requests on the fly and so on and so forth, and developing new features. Maybe a Kanban approach or a lean pull approach where you can sort of sort all these things and prioritize them on the fly instead of bunching them into iterations would work well. And in a lot of today's product and service development paradigms, we're almost into chaos, but not chaos in a bad way. Chaos is actually, the definition of chaos is the patterns aren't where we expect. It doesn't mean disorder. It just means that the patterns don't have the same form that we expect. So the startup way, or lean startup, very MVP-based hypothetical approach works well. What you'll notice now is the red circle with Disciplined Agile around it. All that means is that Disciplined Agile is a living, breathing encyclopedia of all the practices that all these approaches bring to the table. What it does is, no matter what situation you find yourself in, whether you're you're a large organization, you have teams doing all of this, or you're a small organization, you're a startup doing only lean startup, or you're an old organization and you're slowly moving out of waterfall towards your first attempts at doing something resembling Scrum, for example. You will have practices in place, and you will be able, with Disciplined Agile's, what Disciplined Agile does is it provides you, it exposes and documents in the book, which is 350 pages of these practices with, when to use them and the whys, wherefores, and pros and cons, and also the DA browser, which is basically the book in website form for PMI members, but also with a coach, a guide, someone who knows the approach. All it does is it puts all your options on the table, enables you to say, okay, well, we've been using use cases, and user stories are perhaps a way of moving beyond use cases, but in our case, use cases are fine, so to speak, pun intended. So, but what Disciplined Agile does is it made you aware that there was something besides use cases, but by the same token, by knowing and by comparing, you realize, well, okay, now I understand user stories better, but you know what? For us, use cases are still the way to go. So that's all that Disciplined Agile really does. However, it's very difficult to do, and we'll get into that. It's not easy, and we'll get into that in a later question.
Yeah, well, I see Disciplined Agile encompasses Scrum. Scrum is a pretty simple framework. It delivers something of value in 4 weeks or less, and there you go. You're certified. Karen, how would Disciplined Agile enhance this framework like Scrum or disciplines like Kanban?
So I can tell you from the experience that I have and where we were challenged with leveraging just simply Scrum. And so as Danielle mentioned, what Disciplined Agile provided was a wrapper around Scrum. So there was a life cycle that allowed us to have clear milestones and clear goalposts that we needed to be able to find. And so what it allowed for a financial services firm that is highly regulated and highly audited, it allowed us to be able to use all of the agility practices that Scrum offers and other agility practices that offers, but in a safe framework that had clear milestones, clear governance, and clear goals that we needed to be able to achieve that we could then come back and check with an auditor. So how Disciplined Agile enhances or supports something like a Scrum or a Kanban is that it provides you with the flexibility based on your context to be able to apply agility in the way that you need to. So whatever kind of life cycle or that you would need to use, you would use that in the context that you are in. So in our financial services industry, we used a little bit more of a structured kind of life cycle. But in other contexts, maybe you would use something a little bit different. And so that's how, for me anyway, in our organization, we leverage Disciplined Agile.
Okay, and what would structure mean in this case? In the financial industry, structured, what was put in place? What did Disciplined Agile propose in that specific situation?
So it was really the light bulb went off for us when we were able to do a little bit of planning in the inception phase, that we had a lot of rapid development happening in construction, and we were able to hand off what we needed to do and kind of close out the effort in transition. And so by having inception, having, proving out architecture early, having the stakeholder, approval and moving some of those things forward allowed us to create enough audit artifacts that allowed us to be able to leverage Agile in a way that satisfied our auditors, both internal and external, without inhibiting our ability to move really rapidly.
Thank you. And in the Navy, I feel like singing exactly a Village People song, in the Navy. Bill.
Okay, so my experience is a little bit different with this, because where I use Disciplined Agile a lot is in the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Oh. And kind of like what Karen was talking about, what I found great about Disciplined Agile is that I would try to bring in Agile practices And I have to admit, I'm an accidental trainer. The reason I got into training and development was because as a IT project manager, I had to keep training my people. We were so cutting edge on things we were doing that no one had training classes. So I just became a trainer that way. And I was really big into Scrum, and we try to use Scrum, and I work with different federal agencies. And I guess it was best said at one conference I heard, I wish I had said this, but it was such a brilliant insight, that the thing about government is we don't have agile budgeting. So we're stuck on this old traditional, try to predict your budget 3 years or 4 years out, and then build your processes around it. So a lot of times, and you may see in a really good Project Management Institute study on this, in the federal government, you have kind of a combination of traditional and agile, you know, Scrum fall. And I was working in an environment. So I had a lot of issues trying to get my people to come to Scrum and work with it. And I taught classes on this, but they were still stuck in the traditional mode. So the reason I like to Discipline Agile is that everyone gets this idea of ways of working. And when I show them the process goes, and I show them the nice, decision trees, and I say, we can build the way we want to work. And they love that idea, because before with Scrum, they were like, well, we got to do this. I don't understand what the Scrum Master person does. And yeah, I know it's a simple framework, but just some folks just couldn't wrap around it. With this, we can, okay, if you don't like Agile, let's go to Kanban. If you don't like that, we'll go back to traditional. But we can change our ways of working as we go through the project. And I think the best analogy I use, and I'm copyright here, Legos, Lego blocks. And I just said, we can build it like a Lego block. Build it the way you want. Exactly. Right. So I guess the play, and one thing, being in HR, and no knock on HR folks, but they really need some help with their project management. And I've been bringing in Agile. So I've been bringing in the Agile gospel, as I call it, and the Discipline Agile, and how they can use that to improve their processes. So I'm as far away as you can get from IT right now. And in the Navy, I'm working in the Inspector General's office. Okay, we do investigations. Y'all seen NCIS? It's kind of like that. Not as dramatic, but we're talking about how can we use Discipline Agile to help with investigations.
Oh.
So I keep trying to push it in new ways. Yeah.
Okay, so Discipline Agile is not just for IT.
No.
Fantastic. So now I have like a million questions just for DA for HR, but I digress. Danielle, you're on mute. What would you like to add to this, Danielle?
I just had an engagement with which I would call Agile HR, and what I brought to the table was they had this particular client HR department had 38 job descriptions they wanted to write. They had to renovate. And their first reaction was, okay, well, let's go away for 9 months and we'll be back. I said, oh, come back. Back here for a sec. Why don't you find one hiring manager who has an immediate need, give him a draft in 2 weeks and sit with him through the interviews and see if the renovated job profile gets better candidates. There you go. Agile HR.
Yeah. Wow.
And he did it, and it worked. And it worked in a sense that the quality of candidates was better. They were there to see it. And now they're committed to only doing one at a time and finding a hiring manager for each job description to MVP it with. So from a Disciplined Agile perspective, I brought them to a lean startup approach.
Lean startup, really. And pivoting regularly. Yeah, that's fantastic. For many people, Disciplined Agile is just yet another scaling framework. You have your SAFe, LEST, Nexus, so on and so forth, and DA is just another one. And one of the reasons that the perception might be that is that if you go online, you see comparisons between the various approaches, frameworks, methodologies, whatever you want to call it. Is DA just another scaling framework? Danielle?
So no, in a word.
Okay, Bill. No, sorry, I'm just kidding.
Sure, we can share this. We can share this, but I can, knowing the history, I know that back in 2012, when it was only called Disciplined Agile Delivery and it was very IT intensive, even Mark and Scott used to call it a framework. In fact, I started bugging them, say, "You sure, guys, you want to use the word framework?" And sure enough, you know, and I was the instigator. I have a reputation as being a nonchalant agent provocateur. So everywhere I go. So basically that's the role I played. And so, yeah, but at the beginning there was less awareness around what that word would wind up, the cognitive load that word would wind up having, right? And I also I also think that the version 1 surveys every year, the correct answer to what percentage of that should be DA is 0. Right. So what percentage? What are you using as a agile scaling framework? DA should never have been there, right? Because it's not. It's simply not a framework. But it's like anything else, right? Even, you know, you can't stop an avalanche sometimes when people start viewing something as, oh, we've put this in a pigeonhole. It's very hard to reverse that cognitive sort of lockdown.
Especially in the Agile community. We do it on a regular basis, absolutely. Would it be fair to call it a toolbox?
It is. It's a toolbox, and it's a forcing function on critical thinking, is what I like to call it.
So here's an improvised question for you. Karen, what is your favorite, most fantastic tool that you found in DA? Anybody can chime in. Bill, Danielle.
Most fantastic tool. I don't think it's a tool. I think it's a commentary. It's context counts. I think it's the fact that it's looking at each situation and being able to determine exactly what it is I'm going to use out of the toolkit in that particular scenario, and it could be very different in another scenario. And so I think for me, it's context counts.
It's okay. Bill?
I like that answer a lot too. And another thing is enterprise awareness, because in the government agencies, we are so siloed. And I have been in projects where, oh, you guys are creating this, we need to create this too. And in some agencies, and I won't say who it is, but basically we're going to do our own thing, and then we're going to make you join us. And it was just kind of nuts. And I could see, for example, and this is an actual government accountability office study, training and development systems, we spend in the government billions of dollars on these, and there's so much duplication. And I can see that with a lot of projects. So I just love the idea of enterprise awareness. So we don't just make this project in our own little group, and we have it, and we're not getting those economies of scale. So that's one of my favorite features. But I got to tell you, what sells my people on this when I talk to folks is the idea of the process blades and the process goals, and just how that all kind of fits together. So I think that's a really nice way to show, oh, I can see how things flow together. So, and that's why I invited my friend, if I can do a shameless plug, invited my friend Tara Moan, who's from the knowledge management community of DC.
Yeah.
And she's an expert on knowledge management. And one of the things we first noticed, again, being a recent convert, so I'm already picking at DA, where's the knowledge management aspect? And we actually did a little presentation on that at one of the meetings. I forgot the exact group, but about knowledge management and how that could really work with all the different process blades. So,
yeah, we developed excuse me for interrupting.
Okay.
We developed the concept where basic knowledge management principles can be baked in to all of the blades that are being used in the toolkit, because each of them would be necessary. You would have to think about it. It would actually create, a force field.
That was our metaphor.
Okay.
We had a little oven and everything. We bake it in just because it's something so basic, but things that people forget to do, document and keep things together, and knowing where to find things. And all of those things are involved in all of the blades and in some way. And the KM was tying it all together. That was what we said, isn't it?
Yeah. We still got to get our white paper out, but we have put the research into it.
Yes.
Make sure you let us know when the white paper is out.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you.
Danielle, before we get into the couple of one question, one statement from the the participants. Daniel, what is your favorite thing?
The reaction I get every time.
The first two are hard to beat, by the way. I don't know.
Well, mine's sort of very similar. It goes along, the reaction I get from every team that I've done process tailoring with for 7 years, once we've done it for 2 hours, they go, wow, you've showed us options we didn't even realize were options. That it's just that people are blown away. They said, there's so much out there. There's so much that we didn't know. There's so much that we've been missing. It's eye-opening.
We now know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Annie?
Yes, we have 2 questions in the chat right now. One is in French. I'm going to say it in French, Eric, so you know, and I'm going to translate. Est-ce que Disciplined Agile apporte de bonnes pratiques par rapport aux équipes multi-projets? Du moins, propose-t-elle un meilleur cadre de gestion? So, is Disciplined Agile bringing good practices
for multi-team projects?
Yeah, multi-team projects, or is it bringing...
oh no, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. It's multi-project teams. We're adding a little bit of complexity here.
Oui, multi-projet, exactement. So multi-project teams. Or is it bringing a better frame regarding management?
Yeah. So what does Disciplined Agile have to say in regards to teams based on what's written here by Eric Beaulieu? Thank you, Eric, for the question. On multiple teams working on multiple projects. And I assume, Eric, you mean a team might be working on multiple projects at the same time?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're currently working on that mode. I mean, more like we're 5 guys, 5 projects.
Okay, yeah. So Scrum would say stop. What would Disciplined Agile say?
Disciplined Agile would say, and I'll jump in here, guys, and you can, Disciplined Agile say, ask yourself if you're a team. First of all, right? A team is a collection of individuals who are actually working together with a common vision, a common cause, and with common deliverables. So you may be you may report to the same functional manager, but you may be actually individuals working each on your own deliverables, and the fact is you only report to the same manager. I once had a bunch of projects come to me and say, we're a program and we don't know what we're, how to communicate amongst ourselves. And after an hour of talking to them, I said, you're not a program. You're not a program because there is no benefit in delivering all your projects together. So ask yourself that first. The second thing Disciplined Agile would say then is if you are a team struggling with 5 different stakeholders, Disciplined Agile has a couple of blades that you have to look at. Stakeholder management, changing stakeholder needs. How do you prioritize your stakeholders? How you basically divvy work. So you look at the life cycle. Scrum would not work, to Rick's point. You can't build iterations around input from 5 different stakeholders, right? So you would have to move you seriously need to look at a combination of perhaps what Disciplined Agile calls the lean and continuous and exploratory life cycles. So Kanban and lean startup.
Like on the chaos sphere, as you showed in your diagram.
Yes, and chaos not being disorder, simply being the patterns that we don't easily recognize at first to be patterns, or patterns where we didn't expect any.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Another question that we have, I'm going to say it in French and then in English. Ce concept-là, c'est appliqué plus pour des agences marketing ou des agences de création? So is Disciplined Agile more used in marketing agencies or creating agencies?
I think to Bill's point, using it in investigations.
Yeah, investigations.
Yeah.
So I can probably take a part of this. We have a large sales and marketing organization within Franklin, and our business unit uses Disciplined Agile to run business-driven initiatives, not necessarily partnering with technology. And they are able to use them alongside their creative services teams to be able to run initiatives just the same way as if they were leveraging them with, creating a team with technology. And so they're doing the same thing. It's basically, setting up a standing team and being able to organize the team, organize the works and bringing it to the team, and being able to ensure that the team is isolated enough to get the work done. Mm-hmm. And then developing and rolling out the work in rapid fashion. And so it can work in marketing in the same way that it can work in technology.
Thank you. Oh, I feel like asking the C word question. I mean, I'm sure you'll have all read the State of Agile year after year, initially from version 1, and now it's someone else doing it. I'm not sure who now anymore. What's the biggest obstacle to adopting Agile in your organization? Year after year, it's always the same thing: culture, 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 and then more culture. What does DA have to say about this obstacle called organizational culture?
I can start taking a swipe at that.
Go ahead.
Organizational culture is not some mysterious beast, right? It's just the sum of our behaviors. It's the sum of the organizational expectations. It's what happens to you when you stick your neck out, and it's what happens to you when you do something good. Those are the two extremes of culture, right? Mm-hmm. The only way to change culture is from the inside, which is the reason why large transformations of any kind fail, because culture defends itself against attack from the outside. It has to come from here. It's the not made here syndrome. And the only way to change culture is to change people's behaviors. And the only way to change people's behaviors is to give them options, right? How can you change behavior if the only way of working is the one you have? If you have options and you have a safe to fail experimentation environment, you can slowly, with individuals start experimenting new ways of doing things, and all of a sudden a new way of doing things works for a team, and that changes the culture. It changes the culture because all of a sudden the team did something different and they didn't get their heads chewed off. And slowly, and it's a reflective thing too, because the culture, that change then affects other teams, and culture is a mirror and it's sort of a loop. So DA, by its very nature, by its openness to experimentation, by its insistence upon safety, is a great way. And it's triple loop learning. Finally, triple loop learning means that, I'm not to pick on Scrum. Scrum is great for some context, but I'll give you an example of what I mean. Scrum is double loop learning. Scrum will allow you to do retrospectives and you learn about the way you're working. But the only thing Scrum does not allow you to question Scrum. All right? If you do, you're doing Scrum but. So DA will allow you to question everything, right? And it allows you to question DA, but there's nothing there. There is no such thing as doing DA. So you're in triple loop learning. Nothing is preventing you from moving away. And that triple loop learning is the key to changing culture.
So if I can jump in, and my whole job is about behavior change. That's what training and development does. And I'm involved with organizational change all the time. And just like Daniel said here, DA has that built in. And I have found with cultural change, the biggest, starting with the behaviors, is helping people understand what's in it for me. Why should I change my behavior? How will this make my life better? So when I do my training, I'll look at what are the pain points you have now? What are the things that are driving you crazy right now? And then this is what I like about DA, because you're right about Scrum. I actually made a mistake of hiring one Scrum person come in and train some folks. And he got up really upset because he said, you're not doing Scrum, and, stop it. And it's like, they're doing what they have to do to get the project done. And that's what I like about DA. We just work on getting the project done. That's why I love the process workshop. We go through, and I'm going to talk about those process goals. I love them so much, but letting people pick and choose, and they get to choose their own change, which really helps. It's kind of grassroots change instead of having change imposed upon you. Because we get that a lot in government, where we get a directive and it's like, you're going to do this, and we didn't even consult you about it. So I like the way where I can do some grassroots change, come up in here. You can work the way you want to work. We still got to meet these goals, but we're going to figure out how we're going to work those.
And if I can add as well, Eric, in our organization, we continue to push against our culture. So with DA, we started organically, the way Danielle mentioned, with teams that started to make this change and started to act and behave in different ways. And as teams begin to operate in different ways, they kind of begin to demand different things. And so leaders begin to have to change their behavior to be able to support their teams that are beginning to demand different things. Mm-hmm. As we started to organize and started to begin to use Agile at scale, DA at scale, we began to get top-down support. And so when you started to get top-down support, we started to create that psychological safety across the entire organization. Mm-hmm. Once we created that psychological safety, the amount of ability of the teams to begin to experiment and to begin to fail and begin to learn and do all those things just continue to grow. And it's that loop that Danielle mentioned, it really was able to grow and completely begins to just change your culture. But the one caution I would say around culture is there can be a group that we were originally challenged with. I call them the frozen middle, middle management, who are the direct leaders of the teams. So they often don't understand what their role is in Agile, because before I was directing, I was telling you what to do. Now I don't have a role. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not involved in your projects and not doing those things. And so if anyone's involved in transformative change, my advice is to either define roles or flatten your organization. Because it will become a challenge. And what we chose to do is both. For those where we needed to have those leaders in place, we invested in coaching skills for those leaders. So instead of becoming managers or being managers, we taught them how to be coaches. And so learn how to coach people, support the teams, remove roadblocks, et cetera, et cetera. And then in some places, we did flatten the organization as well, because you don't need as many managers once you move to scaling Disciplined Agile across the enterprise.
Very interesting.
If I can jump in on that, because Karen just said a lot of great things there, and I agree with you so much. The problem with government is we can't really flatten the organization, but you are so right about the coaching. And I ran several coaching programs, and I was running the supervisor certificate program. And one of my big things was shoving as much servant leadership at them, coaching behaviors at them, because that really helped us a lot. Because I remember this horrible example. They were wanting to put up an innovation lab. So we had a manager that basically put the people in there and said, now you all be innovative. And it's like, well, no, you got to help build the psychological safety and help them be innovative. You just can't demand innovation. That was a funny manager.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
sorry. All right. So one of the things I really appreciate of DA is the fact that it is agnostic. It is adapted to the context and common sense. Use what's right for you at that moment and have it evolve as context evolves also. But that comes with that level of risk. Could DA be too permissive? The famous putting lipstick on the pig. We are waterfall. It ain't working, but we're gonna call it DA because Scott and Mark says this is DA now, and we're just gonna keep doing what we've been doing for the past 20 years. Have you seen, well, I know, Danielle, you do a lot of organizations, but any of you seen that occurring? We are Agile, we are DA, and guess what? We haven't changed anything.
So in our organization, no. And the reason why is because in addition to our DA implementation, our Agile transformation, we made sure that we shifted our focus or shifted what we were measuring right? So instead of measuring, you know, things like schedule and budget and
story points.
right. We started measuring outcomes and customer satisfaction and things like that. And so we got to a place where we're actually measuring deliverables, meaningful deliverables. So when you start looking at, you know, core tenets of things like Scrum, right, where you're having a demo every 2 weeks and you're looking at having something measurable to be able to deploy within a relatively quick period of time. But it's those kind of practices that we started to implement, and we used those type of practices to build our metrics on. So we changed what we were measuring in order to make sure that that didn't happen.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Karen. That's great.
Great answer.
Danielle, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I do with training and development in the coaching, you know, we have this Phillips ROI, return on investment, and it's how we measure our training programs, the impact of our behavior change and such. So I'm really big on, you know, you can't do just what you want to do, but we got to show the impact of the organization. And we got to show how your efforts, your products, your services, whatever you're producing from this project are going to affect our organization. That's where I'm hitting that enterprise awareness. So I always make sure we roll it up to our strategic plan for the agency. And then again, yeah, you've got a lot of leeway in the process goals you want to pick, but you still have to pick best practices. And these are the rules of the road, unless we want to call a timeout and say, let's change our way of working. And we have another process group and say, okay, why are we doing this? And how do we want to change? But it's still really focused on what are we trying to achieve here? Because, you know, I want to remind folks that, you know, in the federal government, U.S. federal government, we are stewards of the people's money, and we just can't, we got to make sure we're being efficient and effective at all times. So.
Thank you, Bill.
Maybe just to round out the answers, I haven't seen that anywhere for the simple fact that in any organization where that level of basically paralysis, I guess you could call it, had taken hold. If you establish, and Karen hinted at this, it's up to your PMO or your Agile Center of Excellence or whatever body, your group of coaches, someone within the organization has to have some form of oversight and be, you know, at the heart of evolving the organization. And you want to use consistent metric, not consistent metrics, consistent metric categories. What I mean by that is, for example, let's take, you know, so-called what we have in traditional, you know, cost index and schedule index. What you would have as an equivalent with a Kanban or even a Scrum approach, you could use cumulative flow, throughput, you know, the tendency of the velocities to stay stable, things like that. So you would still have a roll up of some kind of dashboard of all your initiatives, and it would be fairly quick you would fairly quickly spot the teams and the areas that were basically not evolving. And you would go, well, you know, guys, because what you're doing is defined by Disciplined Agile is not a free ticket to not make any effort to improve.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions, Annie?
Yes, we have one question in the chat, and sorry if I mispronounce your name, a question from Saladin. So he's asking, don't you think that an organizational assessment, including cultural aspect, must be done to verify if the organization is ready to apply agile method or framework?
Sounds like a loaded question, but yeah, go ahead.
So is the assessment need to be done before trying to implementing it?
So I'll tell you what happened at my firm, and then maybe Danielle can tell you the right answer. I dragged my firm kicking and screaming towards Agile. And because I think that we recognized that we needed to do something differently, but no one was willing to take a step to do something differently, right? And so I started this, we started training, we started moving people forward, we started getting teams moving. And then leaders, we started getting leaders involved, and I will admit, it was in some cases uphill battles where we had to try to convince leaders the what's in it for them, as Bill mentioned, and try to explain to them why this is a better approach and better way to lead. But I don't know that I would do it any differently, because I think if you wait until you're perfectly ready, I don't know that we would have ever been perfectly ready. And so I at this point, I think we're in a really great place, and we're just continuing to evolve our agility practices in a way that I am surprised at the things that we're doing right now. So, you know, I don't know that that's the right answer, but for us, although I pulled them along, it worked out in the end.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have, oh, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah,
I just did one of these. So what I would tend to find problematic in your question is just the word must cited in. I don't think it's a must. I think it can be helpful. And I just actually used this approach of an assessment with a US-based pharmaceutical client in just these last 2 months. But it wasn't just a survey with 6 questions. I spent 5 weeks interviewing 17 executives. I ran a parallel survey. I called people up again. I analyzed all the artifacts of their PMO. I analyzed the statistics of their PMO on project delivery over 2 years. I spent 2 months doing this assessment in order to have a fulsome, objective portrait of where that organization was at. And this was at their request, and it was a fully funded standalone engagement with no promise or engagement to actually do anything beyond that, although it probably will at this point, because it looks like the assessment is showing that definitely they're ready for a first step. So must, no. Can be helpful in some certain circumstances, yes. And if you want it to be really helpful, do it right. Do it deep. Interview. Get to spend 2 months under the hood.
Thank you, Daniel. We have another question, much more short. Luc Bouchard is asking, what about hybrid agile?
Well, I'll take that one because it's kind of leading what you guys said. I mean, I also try to do some assessments myself, but I never had the time to do that, I didn't have the chance in some of the groups. So with the hybrid agile, that's how I kind of approach DA. And if I've got this correct, you know, kind of get people used to the waterfall idea, traditional project management, teach them that, and then kind of start incorporating pieces in. Mm-hmm. So I would show what a Kanban board looks like, or I would talk about a retrospective and kind of build it that way. So hopefully I understand that question correctly. But yeah, a lot of times I had to give you a good case example when I was working with our communication office, which is not it's kind of like the marketing thing you were talking about. They needed something where they can work together as a team, and they need to collaborate on documents and such, and they need to work on events. And the funny thing about this is that sometimes they had to have projects that were a day long. Something happened, they had to respond to it, get a press release out. So it had to be quicker than Agile is what they told me. And then there was some that they had a whole year to plan. So I had to kind of tailor it to what the products and services were. And when we could use Agile, that was good. When we had to do kind of more traditional, just because we were dealing with vendors and, you know, the budget cycle, we would go a little waterfall, you know, mm-hmm. and add a little Agile in. So maybe, and I know the Scrum person that I was working with just hated what I did because he was such an evangelist about this. But whatever worked, let's make it work. We need to get the project and product out. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Gartner was talking about the bimodal at some point, but that kind of disappeared. I don't hear it anymore. Yeah. Sorry, Annie.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat from Fatima. How about team was a less level of maturity? Is that methodology will still be successful?
Yeah. And I do a lot of team training. And part of the thing is that I sometimes come in with a team that's, I'm glad there's no knives in the room right now because there's a lot of conflict and anger. So yeah, building that psychological safety, getting them to work with. And I find that the closer I can get them to being psychologically safe with each other, then I can start putting the Agile in. So there is a certain level that you have to have where they can work together and feel safe and taking risk in front of each other.
Yeah. Feel safe to contribute and feel safe to even challenge the status quo. Right?
Rather than trying to climb over top of each other for a promotion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The next question is huge. Saad,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, exactly.
You can let Saad state it. You can let Saad state it. Saad, go ahead.
Yes, Saad, you want to ask your question directly?
Yeah. Let's be agile about this.
Yeah. I don't know if his microphone is open, or I'll go ahead to just make sure that we don't lose any time. So Saad says, my question is, how do you guys feel a DA type approach copes with a large infrastructure projects where massive predefined budgetary allocations are involved, or where there are getaway accountability point like in public sector spending?
Wow. This is a moment I love being the moderator.
I'll take it real quick, and you guys can expand on this. But in the federal government, the U.S. federal government, we have the federal acquisition regulations. Have anyone here ever read them?
I've heard of them, but it's massive, right?
It's massive, and this is where I talked about we don't have agile budgeting, so sometimes it was hard to work with agile project management. And a lot of folks that have worked with this, and there's a great group, 18F, that has set up a section of this where you can use the FAR and you can use Agile.
18F,
use Agile project management with this. So it is possible. And I think the best thing with DA that I found it was really good, instead of the Scrum that I try to use, was that I can put in waterfall when I need it. And I program of programs, which I can put in there and have, I can have my program be like a traditional project management approach, but I have my project teams doing Agile or Lean or whatever they need to do to get me my products. So I can kind of work around that. So again, it's the thing about the gateway accountability points. And the biggest thing we're talking about is the finances. How are you spending the budget this year? What's the budget look like? And I got to tell you guys, the last few years with continuing resolutions, I don't know if you know what that is, but that's just basically, continuing resolutions. We never knew what our budget was going to be. So you can't even predict it. But you certainly had to follow the FAR, or you're going to go to jail if you don't. And you had to make sure you did have those reports in. So you can do it with DA. I think it's easier to work with DA than I think with Scrum, but that's my opinion.
So I can also add a little bit to this on the infrastructure side. Our infrastructure organization uses DA and uses agile practices actually quite heavily. They like to build out a lot of their practices in 2-week iterations, and break their work down into chunks, et cetera, et cetera. It can absolutely be done. And, you can't build a quarter of a server. So obviously you're doing, and you're using it in the places where it makes sense. So you're building out your server in leveraging a waterfall type of approach, or you're just building out your server and you're doing other things, leveraging agile practices. But you can absolutely use DA, the entire suite of tools, to be able to do your infrastructure projects. Absolutely.
In fact, DA has a specific, the only place where DA gets even a tiny bit descriptive when we've described this is it does recommend using an inception, the construction, and the transition gated phase. And there are lightweight lean agile governance deliverables within there. The first deliverable within the construction phase is proven architecture, which works beautifully with infrastructure. It means basically that if you're taking a disciplined agile approach, any team, no matter what type of work they're doing, their first concern should be a walking skeleton of the entire architecture. Even if we're taking an example of stringing a bunch of APIs and SOA services together, DOS windows similar to saying ping, ping, I'm here, from beginning to end. This goes back way back to the beginnings of Agile. There was always this sort of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin dispute within the Agile community around if it's not delivered to production in end user hands at the end of the sprint, you're not doing Agile. Well, no, even Scrum never said that. Basically, you can choose when you actually push towards your end user or declare something finished. What I'm getting at is you can use the proven architecture milestone, and you can, especially with cloud infrastructure now, you can start building out, a clump of servers, or, start experimenting with different builds. And by the time you hit that gate, you are so practiced, you are so absolutely confident in the quality and the reliability and ruggedness of what you're doing, that going into production should be a yawn-inducing non-event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Annie, how much time do we have left?
Well, now it's 6:35. So if we still want to have time for the networking, I would say maybe a last 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So I guess I don't know if it's a difficult question or not. So one of my major influences is Gerald Weinberg. And Gerald Weinberg used to say it's always a people problem. Take into account individual fears, resistance for whatever reason, team dynamics, ecosystems, so on and so forth. How does DA take that into account, the human side of agility, for lack of a better term? Does it talk about, I don't know, does it refer back to Christopher Avery and personal responsibility, or Tuckman and the stages of team development and stuff like that? Or does it have its own blend of taking into account the human side of Agile? Anybody can chime in.
Yeah, we all decided to go at once, so go ahead.
Yeah. So one of my favorite process goals in there is develop your team.
Okay.
And when you take a look at the best practices there, I can see hints of some of those things like Tuckman and all this. And, I always peg when I'm talking to my folks, develop psychological safety, get our team to be awesome, create a learning organization. So I can kind of weave that together. So that's how I see it addressing it, DA, addressing that. And also, one of the things I know the DA team members are kind of fixed. We have a primary and secondary. I do kind of slip in a coach when I can, and just kind of a team coach. It's people thought, oh, you're trying to slip in a Scrum Master. Well, not really, but I'm slipping in a team coach, but also a coach who can work with the people individually. Because I found and this may be just true with my folks, sometimes it's helping them develop the confidence to be agile. And it's kind of funny because, you got some people, well, you're going to be a little creative. Things are going to kind of change. And there's a great book on this, and I forgot the name, but it's the whole concept of risk appetite and how much risk can our people take. And that's where I kind of get into the team development and helping them. It's going to be a little ambiguous at times. It's going to be a little volatile, but you can handle it and we can get through this and we will make an impact.
With great power comes with great responsibility. And that can scare a lot of people. Karen, Danielle? Anything to add?
Yeah, there's even one of my favorite process goals in DA, and it's the first one you always use almost, is form team. And in there are some pretty powerful questions. Some of the questions are really around like, what do you want this team to be? And it ranges from who gets to decide who joins the team. Is it the manager? Is it the manager after consulting the team? Or is it the team? And you have teams looking at this for the first time. What do you mean teams can decide that who's on the team? And they're looking at each other. They've never even heard of this concept, right? But even that gets people thinking. Then it brings in collaboration between teams. For example, it brings in notions of ambassadors and boundary spanners. When you have more of a distributed program, for example, boundary spanners are like liaison officers in the military. And Bill, you could relate to that, right? Where basically you're affected to another unit, you live and breathe, you live with that other unit, and you report back to your unit. And there's someone in the other team doing the same thing. So it's like a built-in 24/7 scrum of scrums. So there's all kinds of very human communication, team forming questions sprinkled throughout, in addition to what Bill was pointing.
Thank you.
And I would add one last thing is that there are, I remember specifically the rights and responsibilities of people that are participating in DA, right? And so to be treated with respect, to work in a safe environment, to be able to determine how the team works together, other things about, you know, providing good faith information, choosing your way and evolving your way of working, things like that. And so they're all things that are kind of building upon the concepts of how you are developing individuals, developing yourself as well as developing individuals within the team.
Thank you, Karen. Everybody, thank you so much for your generosity. It was fantastic. Fantastic. Annie, would you like to move to the breakout rooms?
Yes, exactly. So for those of you who weren't aware, we're going to create some smaller groups, so breakout rooms, so you can go join either Karen, Bill, or Danielle. And so I'm going to create three groups. Karen is going to go in group number 1, Bill in group number 2, and Danielle in group number 3. So I invite you to join whatever group you would like to join. If ever you're having trouble, just let me know and I'm going to assign you manually to some groups. So let me just stop the recording now because it's not going to be interesting anymore.